I came here raising money. I don't have my gun with me right now, so I'm not going to hold you up or anything like that for money. So anyway, oh, yeah. All right, so I'm excited to be here. Y'all have a wonderful congregation here. Actually, I spent some time in Delight 20-something years ago and preached there for a while. So, okay, let's not go that way. Let's go the other way. There we go. Okay. There are many places in the world that are mentioned in history that have been completely destroyed. Some of these were destroyed by man. Two countries went to war with each other. The one country decided, hey, we're going to just tear that up, and so they did. Sometimes it was by nature that it was destroyed, perhaps a natural disaster, something to that effect. Other times, it's just time that destroys them. I mean, things aren't ever built to last forever. And so, of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, only one, the Great Pyramid of Giza, it's in the middle, up there at the top. That's the only one that still stands. And there are a lot of people who actually even question whether or not the others ever actually existed. Especially the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, constructed by Nebuchadnezzar of the Book of Daniel fame. And they think, well, it was never built because it doesn't exist today. There's no evidence of it today. Well, that's what time will do to things. Other places in the Bible or in history have been turned into shrines. Something important happened there, and so there's a memorial set up so that people will remember what happened at that particular place. This has been the fate of many places that are mentioned in the Bible. In fact, not only have they become shrines, but the shrines have actually turned into, idols. For example, on the island of Patmos, where John wrote Revelation, there are literally thousands of caves. Thousands of caves. But this cave right here is the cave. It is the cave where John received the revelation. More than that, besides having the donation box and the benches there and everything like that, if you look in this corner over here, or the top middle, we'll zoom in a little bit. This right here is a little crevice in the rock where John put his head when he slept. I'm not making this up. And this right over here is where he put his hand when he knelt to pray. I didn't come up with that. That's what the people in Patmos tell us. So anyway, that shows you a little bit about just how idolizing these things can be. But a few of the places in the Bible, though, have actually been left alone. For one reason or another. For example, Mars Hill in Athens is pretty much the same as it was in the days of Paul when he spoke to the Areopagus. There is one difference. Paul's speech to the Areopagus is on a plaque that's on a rock on top of Mars Hill. Another difference is this. This is part of Mars Hill. Shh, don't tell the Greek government. But it's been a number of decades since I was there, so I guess the statute of limitations is gone. But you'll notice it has something of a red tint. That's why it was called Mars Hill. But anyway, not a lot of changes though on Mars Hill in the time since the Bible. Also in this category is the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Galilee is among the Holy Land sites. It has changed very little since the days when Jesus walked on its shores, and yes, on its surface as well. The Sea of Galilee is remarkable for many different reasons. For one reason would be the geography of the Sea of Galilee. And another reason would be the fantastic, the wonderful, incredible things that happened in the ministry of Jesus on and around the Sea of Galilee. Tonight, we're going to take a journey. We're going to journey from Hope, Arkansas, and we're going to go to the Sea of Galilee. Now, I've had a little experience traveling, and I found that it is a whole lot quicker if we travel by map. So we're going to travel by map from Hope to the Sea of Galilee. And we're here. Please return your tray tables to their upright position and make sure your seat belts are fastened. Okay, never mind. All right, so anyway, first let's talk a little bit about the geographic importance of the Sea of Galilee, the geographic significance. And we start with the setting. The setting of the Sea of Galilee is very important. It is one of the lowest lying bodies of water on earth. In fact, it is the lowest lying fresh body of water on the planet Earth. It's somewhere between 686 and 705 feet below sea level. And it's located 25 miles east of the Mediterranean Sea, or the Great Sea. And it's located 25 miles to the west of the Arabian Desert. Now, if you know anything about weather, and we're in southwest Arkansas, we know a little bit about weather, don't we? If you know anything about weather, you know that that's kind of a bad place for a sea to be located. Something else interesting about the Sea of Galilee is that it is surrounded by mountains. Mountains on all sides of it, pretty much. And the cool, moist air from the Mediterranean travels through the mountain passes and gets to the Sea of Galilee. While the warm, dry air from the desert travels the same amount of space, same amount of distance, through different mountain passes, and it gets to the Sea of Galilee. When a low and a high come together, it results in a cool front, where the warm air seeks to rise and the cold, wet air is pushing down, and they have a little skirmish, they get into it a little bit, and sudden and severe storms often resulted from this weather pattern and this mix of weather. So that's something that you need to keep in mind as we think about the Sea of Galilee, is that it is sort of in a unique situation. What about the size of the Sea of Galilee? At its widest, it's 13 miles from north to south and 7 miles from east to west. It has a surface area of roughly 64 square miles. Now, that's sort of hard to picture maybe, but if you have ever been to Branson, Table Rock Lake has a surface area of 66.25 square miles. So it's roughly the same size as Table Rock Lake in Branson. At its deepest point, it is 157 feet deep. That's at its northwest corner of the lake is its deepest point. Now let's talk a little bit about the stage names, or the pseudonyms. So I had to come up with an S, though, for setting, size, stage names. So the stage names, it's also called the Sea of Tiberias in John's Gospel. It's referred to in Luke's Gospel as the Lake of Gennesaret. Both of those are based on some areas around the Sea of Galilee. Tiberias was the home in that area of Tiberius Caesar, and it had a community name there, a town name there, and so the Sea of Tiberias. And in the Old Testament, though, in the book of Joshua, when the Israelites are dividing up the promised land, it's called Lake Chinnereth or Kinnereth, depending on what version of the Bible you have. Joshua 11, 2, 12, 3, and 13, 27 will have one of those two words there. I'm sure you're thinking, well, Carl, that's all well and good, and what a great meteorological weather presentation so far, but this is Wednesday night Bible class. Aren't we supposed to be looking at the Bible? Yes, we are. And so we want to do that real quick. We've seen the geographic significance. Now let's turn our attention to the spiritual significance of the Sea of Galilee. The spiritual significance. Let's talk first a little bit about the shore. The Sermon on the Mount, recorded most famously in Matthew chapters 5 through 7, is believed to have been delivered on a hill on the lake's northwestern shore. So perhaps it was located somewhere between Capernaum and a town called Tabghath nowadays. And they're separated by about a mile. So somewhere in between these two towns is a hill upon which the Sermon on the Mount was preached. Other sources move it a little bit more inland, but most say that this is where it was, in this particular spot, just between Capernaum and Tabghath. The traditional site is called the Mount of Beatitudes. And if you look here, you see it right there, the Mount of Beatitudes. It has a wonderful view of the Sea of Galilee, and it's very nice. In fact, that view of the sea looks like this today. Yes, that is the Church of the Beatitudes right there. They found the exact spot upon which Jesus stood when he delivered the Sermon on the Mount, and they built a shrine there, a shrine that is treated as something of an idol nowadays. Less than a mile from Tabghath is a small bay. On this map, it's called the Cove of the Sower, right there. And again, it's about 2 miles between Capernaum and Tabghath. About in the middle is the Cave of the Sower, or the Cove of the Sower. It's a small bay with some exceptional acoustics. It was just absolutely incredible acoustics. Tabghath, by the way, is also known as Magdalene in Matthew 15 and Dalmantha in Mark chapter 8. So that gives you the biblical name of that town. Today's name is something a little bit different. But this cove is believed to be where Jesus taught the parable of the sower from Peter's boat. You remember, I hope that when Jesus was teaching the people, they were crowding around him. So much so that he couldn't hardly breathe. And so he got in Peter's boat and pushed out a little bit into the cove and taught them from there. It's semicircular in shape, and the slope of the hill actually forms a natural amphitheater. In fact, acoustical research has shown that as many as 7,000 people could hear a person speaking from a boat out here in this bay. 7,000 people. And then you'll also notice up here in this part of the picture and this part of the picture over here is what appears to be farmland. It's always been that way as well. And so when Jesus gets into the boat, he could have looked up and he could have seen in the distance a farmer sowing seed. And that could have led him to the illustration of the parable of the sower. Tabitha is also the traditional site of the feeding of the 5,000, recorded in all four Gospels. Very significant because it's in all four of the Gospels: Matthew 14, Mark 6, Luke 9, and John 6 as well. Some place the feeding of the 5,000 closer to Bethesda, or Bethsaida, which is further over on this side of the Sea of Galilee, as opposed to being over in this area where we're talking about right now. But there's a lot of evidence pointing to where the traditional site. Tabitha has what's known as the Church of the Multiplication of Loaves and Fishes. But it's just a Church of Multiplication for short. And in that church there are several mosaics that date back to the 4th century. And they are in that church, where that church has existed for that amount of time. And so it's very likely that that was the site. At least as late as the 4th century it was believed there. But somewhere between the year 28 and 350, Christians located and idolized the very rock upon which Jesus placed the loaves and the fish when he blessed them. The very rock. And it is now located in the Church of the Heptapigon. The Huptawahua. It means 7 springs. And it's actually a fishing ground near Tabitha. It's thought to be the place where, after his resurrection, Jesus met with 7 of his disciples who had gone fishing and hadn't caught anything. And then Jesus tells them what to do, and they do it, and they catch 153 large fish. John 21, 1 through 14. That is also the site where Jesus reinstated Peter. And so there is, on that particular site, the Church of the Primacy of Peter. So we have that. Another city in the neighborhood is Capernaum. Capernaum was a very important city for Jesus. In his Galilean ministry, Capernaum was his base of his operation. He couldn't very well go back to Jerusalem back and forth, so he made Capernaum his base of operation. It was also the location of several very significant miracles that Jesus performed. For example, the healing of Peter's mother-in-law. You think about the Church of the Primacy of Peter, and that he was the first pope and everything, and yet popes aren't supposed to be married. But why on earth would you have a mother-in-law if you weren't married? I mean, guys, am I right here? Why would you want a mother-in-law if you aren't going to be married? Okay, you younger guys don't know about this, but trust me, okay? Trust me, his mother-in-law was there, so obviously he was married and everything. So anyway, several miracles there. Across the lake is Kersey, which is the traditional site of where Jesus fed the 4,000. Also, it's the site that is associated with the land of the Gadarenes, where legions, demons were driven into pigs. That would be on this side of the lake over here, because that was Gentile country. The other side was Jewish country. Jews didn't deal with pigs, and so it would have to be on the Gentile side where the pigs were. Well, we could go on and on. We could do the very biblical, from Acts chapter 20, topic of speaking till midnight, talking about all of the significant things that happened on the Sea of Galilee, or around the Sea of Galilee. But instead of doing that, I want us to move forward. And I want us to turn our attention now from about the shore to about the sea. Well, sorry about that. To about the sea. Sudden storms are very common. I mentioned to you earlier about the topography of the region, the cool, most Mediterranean air sweeping through those mountain passes, which means it wasn't traveling in a straight line. It was going zigzag back and forth, and the hot, dry air from the desert doing the same thing on the other side. They meet right above that wonderful source of water over the Sea of Galilee, and lots of storms happened. And that was probably the cause of the 2 storms that we read about in the Gospels from the Sea of Galilee. So let's look at the topography just to give you a better idea. You see just how low the Sea of Galilee is compared to the mountains over here. The Syrian desert and the Mediterranean. Just an incredible sight for some really, really impressive storms, if you like storms. If you don't like storms, you probably wouldn't like the Sea of Galilee. But anyway, let's turn our attention now to those 2 storms, because those are some extremely significant things that happened on the Sea of Galilee. The first is sudden storm number 1. It can be found in Matthew 8, Mark 4, and in Luke 8. Jesus had just completed the Sermon on the Mount. He had gone through his all of the Sermon on the Mount teaching with authority. Unlike their teachers of the law, the people have been amazed at it. He'd healed a Roman centurion servant without even going into Capernaum, where the servant was. He had healed many others. He'd turned a few people off who had some misconstrued ideas of what following Jesus really meant. You could say he's had a pretty busy day, or a pretty busy few days. Mark 4:34 tells us that he had taught the people many things in parables that day. So Jesus has had a pretty busy day, teaching, healing, doing the things that Jesus did. Jesus was 100% God, but he was also 100% man. To our finite brains, that doesn't make sense, does it? But Jesus is infinite, as is God. One day we might understand it, but we don't right now. But he was 100% man, 100% God. And that 100% man is significant because Jesus got tired. So he gives orders to go across to the other side of the lake. And let's pick up the story. Let's read Matthew 8, verses 23 through 27. It says, "And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being swamped by the waves. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him, saying, 'Save us, Lord, we are perishing.' And he said to them, 'Why are you so afraid, O you of little faith?' Then he rose and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was great calm. And the men marveled at him, saying, 'What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the waves obey him?'" Consider that this storm terrified even the experienced fishermen from the Sea of Galilee. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were disciples now, but they had been raised on the Sea of Galilee, raised fishing on the Sea of Galilee. They had been through all sorts of storms, yet this one scared them to death. In fact, that's kind of what they thought was going to happen to them. So what do? Well, Jesus is in the boat and he's asleep. So they wake him up. Let me ask you, why would they wake him up? I mean, surely they don't expect him to do what he's going to do. I mean, did they want him to help bail water? Maybe, I don't know, make sure he was awake when he drowned? I don't know. But for whatever reason, they wake Jesus up and say, "Don't you care if we perish?" And Jesus, while the storm is raging, he chastises, he criticizes, he rebukes his disciples. And then after he rebukes his disciples, he rebukes the storm. And all of a sudden, this strong, severe storm turns into a great calm. The Greek word for great is megas. We get our, mega stars and stuff like that, big, huge stars. Well, that's where we get that word from. It's from the Greek. The same word that Matthew uses to describe the storm, he uses a form of that same word to describe the calm afterwards. Now, we've been through some storms here in southwest Arkansas, right? When a particularly strong storm passes through and the worst part's over, what happens? Typically the rain starts to taper off a little bit. The winds aren't blowing quite as strong. It doesn't stop just like that, does it? This storm stopped just like that. And it amazes the people. So the disciples and those who were in the boat with him, Mark 4:36 tells us, I would also imagine that others who were perhaps on the Sea of Galilee, maybe fishing or doing whatever, and they got caught in this storm, and then the storm just all of a sudden stops, they got to be wondering what's going on as well. They are amazed at Jesus. Now what about sudden storm number 2? Got to kind of hurry up here. Sudden storm number 2. Matthew 14, Mark 6, and John 6. Jesus had just fed the 5,000 men, plus women and children. But all the accounts tell us it's 5,000 men. So it was probably feeding closer to 10 to 12,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. No wonder the people, according to John 6:21, or John 6:15, wanted to come and force Jesus to become king. I mean, if anyone could do that, if anyone could feed 12,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, he's got my vote for king, yeah. He's going to take care of food. We don't have to worry about food anymore. So we've got that going on. So Jesus sends his disciples away. Now some say, Mark says he sent them to Bethsaida, which is near Capernaum, while he dismissed the crowd. Matthew says he sent them to the other side, and John says that he sent them to Capernaum. Then a storm started brewing. Wait a minute, Carl, what'd you say? You said that Matthew says one thing, Mark says another thing, and John says something else. I smell one of those contradictions, don't you? I mean, that can't be right, can it? I mean, there's a contradiction there. None of them be right. Then the Bible must not be right. Well, that's not necessarily the case. You see, Bethsaida and Capernaum were not that far apart. They may look that far apart on this map, but the scale of the map shows that it's probably roughly 2.5 miles between Capernaum and Bethsaida. And from Tabitha to Capernaum was roughly 2 miles as well. So it wasn't that far that they were sailing. Okay? As for Matthew saying that they were going to the other side, his next story in Matthew 14, verse 34, picks up on the other side of the lake. So there's really not a contradiction here. It's just a difference in focus. Perhaps Jesus told them to go to either Bethsaida or Capernaum, and then he, after he fed the 5,000 and went up on the mountain to pray, he was going to walk and meet them there, and then they were going to go to the other side of the lake. Either way, it's not really a contradiction at all. What's more amazing to me is that the text tells us after they had rowed 3 or 4 miles. Okay, it was not that far to either of those places. And yet they had rowed 3 or 4 miles. That tells me they were a little bit off course. Don't you think? They were probably more than just a little bit off course because of the storm. I mean, you would think that if they were going from, say, here to here or here, they'd stay pretty close to the shore. Yet the text tells us in Matthew 14:24 that they were a long way from land because the wind was against them. And yet, even though Jesus was miles away from them, and it was dark, okay, the fourth watch of the night between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., okay, so it's dark then, and there's a storm, so there's cloud cover, so the moon and the stars aren't showing. Even though all that was going on, Mark 6:47 says he saw them, or he was seeing them straining at the oars. Jesus had some awesome eyesight. Or maybe it wasn't necessarily just eyesight that he had. Maybe he just knows when his people are in trouble. This time, in Matthew 14, verse 23 through 33, we read about Jesus coming out to them walking on the water. And he walks on the water to them, and they think he's a ghost. They're scared. Again. And so, what does Jesus say? Hey, don't be afraid, it's me. What's Peter do? You know Peter, he's always putting his foot in his mouth, right? He says, if it's really you, tell me to come to you. How many of you would have done that? Said, okay, I think you're a ghost, but if it's really you, tell me to come to you, and I'm going to get out of the boat and I'm going to walk on the water to you. And Jesus says, well, come on then. And Peter walks on the water. He takes at least a few steps. He's apparently far enough away that he can't grab onto the boat when he begins to sink. But he's close enough to Jesus that Jesus is able to help him. Or maybe Jesus just sort of moves really quickly to help Peter out when he begins to sink. This time, Jesus doesn't even have to say a word. Matthew and Mark tell us that he got into the boat and the storm ceased. The storm quieted. John actually adds in John 6:21 that when Jesus got into the boat immediately arrived at its destination. So they didn't even have to row anymore. They didn't have to sail anymore. They immediately got to where they were going. You know, there is so much more that could be said about the Sea of Galilee in the life of Christ. So much more. Even from the beginning of his ministry, when Jesus called his first disciples, what were they doing? Cleaning their nets after fishing all night on the Sea of Galilee. Clearly, the Sea of Galilee played an important role in the life of Christ. Certainly, it's a marvel even for visiting tourists today. I'm sure you have one question on your mind. So what? The late Stafford North, when I was in one of his preaching classes at Oklahoma Christian, told us the two most important words in preaching are so what? So what? We're going to sing a song and then I'm going to tell you so what.